I'm Braden Myers, 32 years old, and my own mother just called me a worthless charity case in front of 50 of her wealthiest friends. Before I tell you how I ended up holding the deed to a multi-million-dollar penthouse while my stepfather laughed in my face, do me a favor. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me feel a little less alone in this. The air inside the Cedar Grove Country Club smelled of expensive perfume, stale champagne, and desperation. It was a smell I hadn't been around in a decade, but it hit me the moment the valet opened the heavy oak doors. I had parked my car, a phantom black Rolls-Royce, around the back, near the service entrance. I didn't want them to know. Not yet. I needed to know who they were when they thought I was nobody. I adjusted the cuffs of my suit. To the untrained eye, it was just a simple charcoal suit. To anyone who knew fabric, it was bespoke Italian wool, tailored to the millimeter, worth more than the catering budget for this entire party. But I knew my family. They didn't have trained eyes. They only saw flash. They only saw loud labels and shiny things. I walked into the ballroom, holding a small box wrapped in deep navy velvet. My hands weren't shaking. I thought they might be, but they were steady as a rock. That's what 10 years of building an empire does to you. Kills the nerves. The room was buzzing. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the round tables. A string quartet was murdering Mozart in the corner. And there, in the center of it all, was my mother, Linda. She looked exactly the same and yet entirely different. Her hair was lighter, pulled back in a severe bun that pulled her face tight. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the lights, laughing at something a woman in pearls had just said. Beside her stood Richard, my stepfather. He was holding a glass of whiskey like it was a weapon, his face flushed red. He looked older, tired, the lines around his mouth deep and bitter. And then there was Derek, my stepbrother, the golden boy. He was leaning against the bar, loudly recounting some story to a group of bored-looking women. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, too shiny, and too blue. But what caught my eye was what he had placed conspicuously on the high-top table next to his drink. A car key. Ferrari red. I almost laughed. I knew for a fact Derek didn't own a Ferrari. My intelligence team had run a full background check on the family before I drove down here. Derek was drowning in credit card debt and worked a consultant job at Richard's failing company that paid him barely enough to cover the interest on his loans. That key was a prop, a rental, a lie, just like this whole party. I took a deep breath and stepped into the light. Happy anniversary, Mom. The conversation at the nearest table died instantly. It rippled outward like a wave. Silence spread across the room until the only sound was the scraping of a cello bow from the oblivious quartet. My mother turned. Her smile didn't just fade. It shattered. She looked at me like I was a ghost or worse, a debt collector. Braden, she whispered. Then her eyes scanned me. She looked at my shoes, plain leather. She looked at my suit, no visible brand logos. She looked at the lack of a watch on my wrist. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She didn't see money. She saw a burden. The shock on her face hardened into annoyance. What are you doing here? I received an invitation, I said calmly, holding up the cream-colored envelope, to celebrate 15 years. Richard stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on my mother's shoulder. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the box in my hands. We sent that out of courtesy, boy. We didn't think you'd actually show up. Well, the prodigal son returns. Derek's voice cut through the tension. He pushed off the bar and swaggered over, picking up his Ferrari key and twirling it around his finger. Look at you, Braden. Still wearing the same funeral attire, I see. What is that, off the rack at Macy's? A few guests chuckled. Nervous laughter. They sensed blood in the water. It's good to see you, Derek, I said, keeping my voice level. I see you're doing well. I glanced at the key. Better than well? Derek sneered. I'm closing deals you couldn't even dream of. Meanwhile, we hear you're... What? Bouncing between construction sites? Laying bricks? Something like that, I said. It wasn't a lie. I started laying bricks. Now I owned the companies that bought the bricks. Why did you come, Braden? My mother's voice was sharp, cutting. She stepped away from Richard, closing the distance between us, but not to hug me. She was blocking me like a bouncer keeping riffraff out of a club. If you think because it's our anniversary, we're going to open our wallets, you're mistaken. Richard's business is in a delicate transition. We don't have money to spare for your lifestyle. My lifestyle? I asked. Drifting. Failing. She spat out the words. I told my friends you were traveling. Finding yourself. I didn't tell them my son is a 32-year-old who can't hold down a real career. The injustice of it burned in my chest. A cold, hard flame. She had no idea where I had been. She never asked. Not once in 10 years had she picked up the phone to ask if I was alive, let alone employed. I didn't come for money, Mom, I said, lifting the velvet box. I came to give you something. Richard snorted. He took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes narrowing. A gift? From you? What is it, a coupon book? A homemade card? It's a chance, I said, looking directly at him. For a fresh start. I held the box out to my mother. Happy anniversary. She looked at the box. For a second, just a split second, I saw curiosity. Maybe even a flicker of hope. But then she looked around the room. She saw the eyes of the devastatingly judgmental elite of Cedar Grove watching her. She saw Mrs. Gable whispering behind her hand. She saw the waiter pausing with a tray of crab cakes. She couldn't risk it. Accepting a gift from her failure of a son would be admitting connection. It would be admitting that I was part of this picture. She took a step back. I don't want it. Mom, just open it. I said softly. I said no. Her voice rose to a screech. Look at you, Braden. You show up here, unannounced, looking like a beggar, trying to guilt us with some cheap trinket. You're an embarrassment. An embarrassment, I repeated. The words tasted like ash. You've always been a freeloader, she hissed, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. Waiting for a handout. Waiting for someone to save you. You couldn't survive on your own when you were 18, and you clearly can't do it now. Richard laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. He stepped forward and swiped his hand through the air. Smack. He hit the box right out of my hand. It flew through the air and landed with a heavy thud on the marble floor. It skidded, stopping right at the feet of Derek. Oops, Richard grinned. Clumsy me. We don't need your cheap gift, Richard announced, puffing out his chest, addressing the room more than me. We have everything we need. Take your trash and get out of my club. The room was deathly silent. 50 people. 50 witnesses to the final severance of a Bond one had spent a decade trying to repair in my head. I looked at the box on the floor. The velvet was dusty now. Inside that box sat the deed to the penthouse at the Millennium Tower in Manhattan. Property I had developed. Property worth $2.5 million. Fully paid off. A retirement gift that would have solved every financial problem they were currently hiding. I looked at my mother. She wasn't looking at me. She was smoothing her dress, signaling to the quartet to start playing again, dismissing me like a spilled drink. Something inside me snapped, but it wasn't a violent snap. It was the sound of a lock clicking open, the final chain falling away. I started to laugh. It started as a low chuckle, then grew into a full, genuine laugh. It echoed off the high ceilings. It was the laugh of a man who just realized the joke was on everyone else. What's so funny? Derek asked, kicking the box slightly with his polished shoe. You losing your mind, bricklayer? I stopped laughing and looked at him. Then I looked at Richard. Finally, I rested my gaze on my mother. I was just thinking, I said, my voice projecting clearly without shouting. I was going to give you a way out. I was going to give you a chance to be a mother again. But you're right, Mom. You don't need my gift. I walked over to the box. I knelt down, slow and deliberate. I brushed the dust off the velvet. You should probably check the guest list again, Richard, I said, standing up. I think you'll find I wasn't invited as your stepson. What are you babbling about? Richard spat. I'm leaving, I said. But before I go, I think everyone here deserves to know exactly what you just threw in the trash. I placed my hand on the lid of the box. But to understand why this moment felt so good, why seeing the blood drain from their faces a few minutes later was worth every second of pain, I have to take you back. Back to the day the basement door locked behind me for the first time. Back to the scar that started it all. 12 years ago, I wasn't standing in a country club in a bespoke suit. I was 16 years old, standing in the rain in a cemetery, watching a mahogany casket being lowered into the ground. My father, David Myers, was a good man. He wasn't rich. He was a general contractor, a man who built houses with his own two hands. He smelled like sawdust and pine and old coffee. He had rough hands that could fix anything, from a leaky faucet to a broken heart. He used to take me to his job sites on Saturdays. He'd roll out these massive blueprints on the hood of his truck, point to the lines and say, "Braden, look at the foundation. If the foundation is weak, the castle falls. Doesn't matter how pretty the tower is. Always check the foundation." He died on a Tuesday, a brain aneurysm, gone before he hit the floor. No goodbyes, no warnings, just silence. At the funeral, I was numb. I felt like the world had turned gray. But my mother, Linda, was crying, sure. She held a handkerchief to her face and sobbed when the pastor spoke. But I noticed something. She wasn't looking at the casket. She was looking at the guests. She was checking who had sent flowers. She was performing grief, not feeling it. We hadn't even ordered the headstone when the truck started arriving. 2 weeks. That's how long it took her. I came home from school to find a stranger in our driveway. He was loading my father's tools into a van. His table saw, his drills, his prized set of Japanese chisels. "Mom!" I ran into the house. "What's going on? Who is that guy?" My mother was in the kitchen counting a stack of cash. She looked up, her eyes bright, brighter than they had been in years. "We're clearing out the clutter, Braden," she said, snapping a rubber band around the money. "Your father left us in a tight spot. We need to be practical." "That's Dad's life," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't sell his tools. He promised me that tool set." "They're just things, Braden. Grow up." But it wasn't just the tools. The next day, Dad's truck was gone. His 1998 Ford F-150. It wasn't a pretty truck, but it was him. It was the truck we went fishing in. It was the truck where he taught me to drive. "I got a good price for it," Mom said, sipping wine. "Why?" I screamed. "We have the insurance money. Dad said the policy would take care of us." "That money is for the future," she said vaguely. 3 days later, the future arrived in the driveway. It wasn't a college fund. It wasn't a savings bond. It was a Porsche, a bright red used Porsche 911. And driving it was Richard Thornton. Richard was a real estate developer my dad had done some subcontracting for. Dad didn't like him. He called him a shark in a cheap suit. Richard smiled too much, but his eyes never smiled. "Hello, Braden," Richard said, stepping out of the car. He put his arm around my mother's waist. My mother, whose husband had been in the ground for less than a month. She leaned into him, giggling like a schoolgirl. "Richard is going to be helping us out," Mom said. "He's going to take care of us." "Helping us?" I looked at the Porsche. "Is that why you sold Dad's truck? To buy him a car?" "Watch your tone, boy," Richard said. His voice was low, dangerous. "Your mother deserves nice things. She's had a hard life with a blue-collar worker. It's time she stepped up in the world." That was the twist I never saw coming. My mother hadn't just met Richard. You don't move a man into your house 4 weeks after a funeral unless you knew him before. Long before. Within 2 months, Richard and his son, Derek, moved in. Derek was 20 at the time. He had dropped out of college and was taking a gap year to find himself. Finding himself apparently involved eating all our food, sleeping until noon, and treating me like his personal servant. "The room arrangements aren't working," Richard announced at dinner one night. "Derek needs space. He's a grown man. He can't be in the guest room." It's too small for his equipment. Equipment? I asked. Derek had a DJ turntable he used once a month. He needs the master guest suite, Richard said. That's my room, I said. I've had that room since I was born. Well, you're young, Mom said, not looking at me. She was cutting her steak, focusing intently on the meat. You can adapt. Where am I supposed to go? The basement is finished, Richard said. It's private. You'll like it down there. It's like a man cave. It wasn't a man cave. It was a dungeon. It was damp. It smelled of mildew. The windows were tiny slits near the ceiling that looked out at the dirt of the garden beds. When it rained, water seeped in through the corner. I spent my junior and senior years of high school in that basement. I'd lie in bed at night, listening to the footsteps above me. I could hear them laughing. I could hear Richard opening bottles of wine bought with my father's life insurance. I could hear Derek blasting music in my old room. I felt like a parasite in my own home. One night, I came upstairs to get a glass of water. Mom and Richard were in the living room. They didn't hear me. The insurance payout came through for the second policy, Mom said. Her voice was giddy. 200,000. My heart stopped. Dad had told me about that policy. He said, Braden, if anything happens to me, there's a policy specifically for you, for college, for your start in life. Don't let anyone touch it. That's excellent, Linda, Richard purred. That will cover the expansion of my firm. And we can get Derek that new car he's been whining about. The BMW. What about Braden? Mom asked. But she didn't ask it like she was worried. She asked it like she was checking off a list. The boy is tough, Richard laughed. He's like his father. He can work with his hands. He doesn't need fancy schools. He'll be fine. You're right, Mom sighed. I just want to be happy, Richard. I'm so tired of worrying about money. I want to start over. Start over. That phrase burned itself into my brain. To her, my father, my childhood, my existence, it was all a rough draft. A mistake she wanted to crumple up and throw away so she could live this fantasy life with Richard. I went back down to the basement without the water. I sat on my bed, staring at the concrete wall. I didn't cry. Crying was for people who had hope that someone would hear them. I knew then that no one was listening. I started saving. Every penny I made bagging groceries, mowing lawns, fixing neighbors' fences. I hid it. I hid it in a hollowed-out book in the basement ceiling tiles. I studied harder than I ever had. I got straight A's. I got into the architecture program at a prestigious university in the state. It was my ticket out. It was my lifeline. But lifelines can be cut. And on the night of my high school graduation, Richard brought the scissors. The day I turned 18 was the day the clock ran out. Most kids get a party, maybe a car, or at least a cake. I got an eviction notice masked as a life lesson. I had been accepted into the architecture program at Cornell. It was a miracle. I had a partial scholarship, but there was still a gap. A big one. I needed $8,000 for the first semester's tuition and housing deposit. I had saved $3,000 from my odd jobs, hiding the cash in the ceiling of the basement, but I was short. I knew about the insurance money. I knew they had spent it, but I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a shred of maternal instinct left in Linda Thornton. I waited until after dinner. Derek was out partying in the BMW that my father's death had paid for. Richard was in his study smoking a cigar. Mom was in the kitchen. Mom, I said, putting my acceptance letter on the counter. I need to talk to you about school. She glanced at the letter, then back at her wine glass. Cornell. That's an expensive school, Braden. It's the best program in the country, I said. I got a scholarship. Covers 60%. That's nice. I have $3,000 saved. I continued, my hands sweating. I just need help with the rest. $8,000. Just for the first year. I can work, I can get loans for the rest, but I need the deposit now. She sighed. A long, dramatic exhale that smelled of Chardonnay. Braden, we've discussed this. Money is tight. Money is tight? I pointed to the driveway. Richard just bought a jet ski. Derek drives a brand new car. You just redecorated the living room. Those are Richard's assets, she said sharply. He works hard for his money. Dad worked hard for his money too, I snapped. And you gave it all to them. The insurance policy, Mom. The one Dad left for me. Where is it? Her face went pale, then red. How dare you? I used that money to keep a roof over your head. To feed you. Do you have any idea how much you cost to raise? I've been living in a basement for 2 years. Richard appeared in the doorway. He was wearing a silk robe, the smoke from his cigar curling around his head like a halo of toxins. What is this shouting? He demanded. He wants money, Richard, Mom said, playing the victim instantly. He thinks he's entitled to $50,000 for college. 8,000, I corrected. I just need 8,000. Richard laughed. He walked over to the counter, picked up my acceptance letter, looked at it, and tossed it into the trash can. You don't need Cornell to pour concrete, boy, Richard said. And that's all you're good for. I'm going to be an architect, I said, my voice trembling with rage. Not on my dime. Richard stepped closer, invading my space. He was a big man, heavy with rich food and laziness, but he knew how to be intimidating. Let me make something clear to you, Braden. This is my house, my rules. And my rule is, this house doesn't support freeloaders. Freeloader. There it was. The word that would haunt me for a decade. You're 18 now, Richard continued. Legally an adult. Legally not my problem. If you want a degree, earn a scholarship. Full one. That's how the real world works. No handouts. Mom. I looked at her. Are you going to let him do this? Dad wanted me to go to school. Mom looked at Richard, then at the floor. She picked up a dish towel and started wiping a spot on the counter that was already clean. Richard is right, Braden. You need to learn independence. Derek needs our support right now. He's fragile. You've always been strong. Fragile. I laughed. A bitter, broken sound. He's 22 and plays video games all day. Get out, Richard said calmly. I froze. What? You heard me. You're disrupting my peace. You're ungrateful. And you're an adult. So, get out. It's raining, I said. It's 10 o'clock at night. Then you better start walking fast. Richard smiled. Pack your things. You have 30 minutes. Anything left in the basement after that goes in the incinerator. I looked at my mother one last time. Mom. She didn't turn around. She just kept wiping the counter. Rub, rub, rub. Erasing the stain. Erasing me. I went down to the basement. I grabbed 2 duffel bags. I packed my clothes, my few books, and the photo of my dad I kept under my pillow. I climbed up on the chair and punched the ceiling tile, grabbing my stash of cash. 30 minutes later, I was standing on the front porch. The rain was pouring down, cold and relentless. Richard opened the door. He didn't say goodbye. He just tossed an umbrella at me. A broken one with a bent spoke. Don't come back until you can afford to buy the place, he joked. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I stood there for a moment, staring at the heavy wood. I could see the warm glow of the living room lights through the window. I saw them sit back down on the couch. Richard poured more wine. Mom laughed at something on the TV. They had already forgotten me. I turned around and walked into the rain. I walked 4 miles to the Greyhound bus station. I sat on a plastic bench, soaking wet, shivering, clutching a bag that contained my entire life. I had no place to go, no plan, just $3,000 and a heart full of hate. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts. Who could I call? My high school friends were kids. They couldn't help. My dad's old friends had all been pushed away by Linda. Then, my thumb hovered over a name I hadn't thought about in years. Aunt Patty, my dad's older sister. She lived in Boston. Mom hated her. She called Patty trashy because she was a nurse who lived in a small apartment and spoke her mind. Mom had banned her from the funeral. I dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello. Her voice was raspy, tired. Aunt Patty? I choked out. It's Braden. There was a silence on the line. Then, Braden? Oh my God. Honey, is everything okay? They kicked me out, I whispered. I have nowhere to go. Where are you? The bus station. Get on the next bus to Boston, she ordered immediately. I'll be at the station waiting for you. Don't you worry, baby. You're coming home. I didn't know it then, but that phone call didn't just save my life. It changed the destiny of everyone in that house I had just left. Because Aunt Patty had something my mother didn't know about. A secret. A weapon my father had left behind, just in case this exact moment happened. Aunt Patty's apartment in Boston was small. It smelled of peppermint tea and old books, a stark contrast to the sterile, expensive scent of my mother's house. But it was warm, and for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't sleeping in a basement. I was on a pull-out couch, but it felt like a king-sized bed because I was wanted there. The morning after I arrived, Patty made me breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, the works. We sat at her tiny kitchen table, and she placed a wooden box in front of me. It wasn't fancy, just a simple oak box with a brass latch. Your father gave me this 3 months before he died, Patty said, her eyes watering. He came to see me. He said he was worried about Linda. He said she was changing. He made me promise to keep this safe and only give it to you if you were truly in trouble. I opened the box. Inside was a bank book and a letter. I opened the bank book first. It was a savings account in my name with Patty as the custodian. The balance was $47,000. I stared at the number. Where did he get this? He worked overtime, Patty said. Side jobs on weekends. He hid it from Linda. He knew Braden. He knew she would blow through everything if he died. He wanted to make sure you had a foundation. Then I read the letter. Son, if you're reading this, things haven't gone the way I hoped. But I believe in you. You have a builder's hands and a king's heart. Don't let them break you. Build something they can't tear down. Love, Dad. I cried. For the first time since the funeral, I let it all out. I wept for the father I lost and the mother I never really had. But then, I wiped my face, and I got to work. That $47,000 wasn't lottery money. It was seed money. I didn't go to Cornell. I couldn't afford the rest of the tuition even with Dad's money, and I refused to take out loans that would cripple me. Instead, I went to a state school in Boston for construction management and architecture. I worked during the day. I was a laborer on construction sites. I carried drywall up 4 flights of stairs until my shoulders felt like they were on fire. I mixed cement until my hands were raw and blistered. I learned the business from the mud up. While the other guys on the crew were taking lunch breaks, I was studying the blueprints. I was asking the foreman questions about zoning laws, about permits, about supply chains. At 22, I graduated top of my class. I used the rest of Dad's money to flip a foreclosed townhouse in Southie. I did the work myself. I laid the floors, I hung the cabinets, I painted the walls. I sold it 4 months later for a $60,000 profit. I reinvested everything. At 24, I started Myers Design and Build. At 26, I landed my first commercial contract. At 28, I rebranded to BM Architecture. We weren't just flipping houses anymore. We were designing skylines. I worked 18-hour days. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I didn't date. I was a machine fueled by a single burning obsession: show them. Every time I wanted to quit, every time a deal fell through, I heard Richard's voice, "Take your trash and get out," and I would get back up. By 30, I was a millionaire. By 32, I was a multimillionaire. But the real turning point, the moment that set up the dominoes for tonight, happened 6 months ago. I was in my office in Manhattan, looking over a portfolio of distressed assets my holding company, Vanguard Holdings, was considering acquiring. My acquisitions manager, David, named after my dad, put a file on my desk. "This one is messy, boss," David said. "A mid-sized construction firm in New Jersey. They're over-leveraged. They bet big on a commercial plaza that got stalled in zoning. They're defaulting on 3 major loans. The bank is looking to sell the debt for pennies on the dollar just to get it off their books. I opened the file. Thornton Construction. CEO Richard Thornton. My blood ran cold. I looked at the financials. It was a disaster. Richard had been bleeding the company dry to fund his lifestyle. The country club memberships, the cars, the trips, it was all funded by company debt. And now the bank was calling it in. Buy it, I said. David looked surprised. Sir, it's a sinking ship. The assets aren't worth the liability. I said buy it. I looked up, my eyes cold. Buy the debt. Become their primary creditor. Do it through a shell company. I don't want them to know it's Vanguard. And definitely don't let them know it's me. Understood. Within a week, I owned Richard Thornton. I owned his house. I owned his cars. I owned the shirt on his back. He just didn't know it yet. But life isn't just about revenge. It's about balance. And while I was building my empire, I met Sarah. Sarah was the opposite of my mother. She was a corporate lawyer. Sharp, fierce, and fiercely loyal. We met across a negotiation table. She was representing a client suing me. She destroyed my arguments so thoroughly that I asked her out to dinner afterwards. She knew my story. She knew about the basement. She knew about the letter. You have to close the loop, Braden, she told me one night, lying in bed in our penthouse overlooking Central Park. You can't carry this hate forever. It's poison. I don't hate them, I said. I just want justice. Then go get it, she said. And then the mail arrived. The envelope was cream-colored, thick cardstock, embossed with silver lettering. It looked expensive, but I knew the paper was probably unpaid for, just like everything else in their lives. You are cordially invited to the 15th wedding anniversary of Linda and Richard Thornton. They invited you? Sarah asked, picking up the card with 2 fingers like it was contaminated. They must be desperate, I said, studying the RSVP card. I called Aunt Patty. She was the only one I kept in touch with. They are desperate, Patty confirmed. The word in the family is that Richard is in big trouble. He's looking for investors, silent partners. He's been asking around about you. About me. He heard a rumor that you were doing okay in the city. Someone saw your name on a permit for a renovation in Brooklyn. He doesn't know you're the Braden Myers of BM Architecture. He thinks you're just a successful contractor. He probably wants to hit you up for a loan. A loan. The irony was delicious. Are you going? Patty asked. I think I have to, I said. It's time. I decided to set a trap. A test. I wanted to give my mother one last chance. A real chance. If she showed even a microscopic amount of genuine affection. If she hugged me. If she apologized. If she treated me like a son instead of an ATM, I would help them. I wouldn't tell them I owned their debt immediately. I would restructure it. I would let them keep the house. I would give them a graceful way to downsize. But if she was the same Linda, well, I went shopping. I didn't buy a watch or jewelry. I went to the sales office of my own building, the Millennium Tower. I had the legal team draw up a deed transfer for the penthouse unit. Market value $2.5 million. It was a beautiful apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, a view of the skyline that would make you weep. It was the kind of start over my mother had always dreamed of. I put the deed and the keys in a velvet box. You're really going to give this to her? Sarah asked as I packed. After everything? Only if she passes the test, I said. And if she fails? Then I give it to the person who actually saved me. Sarah smiled. I'll drive the Rolls. You carry the box. We drove down to New Jersey on the day of the party. The leaves were turning orange and gold. It was beautiful, but my stomach was in knots. We parked the Rolls-Royce Phantom around the back of the club, near the dumpsters. Why are we hiding the car? Sarah adjusted her dress. She looked stunning in emerald green. Because wealth whispers, Sarah, I said, kissing her hand. But debt screams. I want to see how they treat me when they think I have nothing. I walked into that party with my heart open. Just a crack. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted my mom to see me and cry. I wanted her to say, "I missed you." But you already know what happened. You saw the insult. You saw the slap. You saw the box flying across the floor. She failed the test. She didn't just fail it. She set it on fire and danced on the ashes. So now we are back in the present. The box is in my hand. The room is silent. Richard is red-faced. Derek is smirking. My mother is looking at me with pure disgust. It's time to drop the hammer. I think everyone here deserves to know exactly what you just threw in the trash, I said, my voice echoing in the sudden silence. I lifted the lid of the box. Inside, resting on the crushed velvet, was a heavy brass key and a folded document with a blue legal cover. "What is that?" Derek laughed, stepping closer. "A key to your diary? A storage unit." I ignored him. I reached into the box and pulled out the document. I unfolded it slowly. The paper crispness snapped in the quiet room. "This," I said, holding it up for the room to see, "is the deed to the penthouse at the Millennium Tower in Manhattan." A gasp rippled through the crowd. I saw heads turn. People whispered, "Millennium Tower? That's the new building on 57th Street. It is fully paid for," I continued. "Market value, $2.5 million. No mortgage. No HOA fees for 5 years." I looked at my mother. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "What?" she whispered. "Is this a joke?" "No joke, Mom," I said. "I bought this for you. I thought maybe after 10 years you'd be tired of pretending to be rich and might want to actually be secure. I thought maybe you'd want a home that no one could kick you out of." Richard scoffed, though he looked paler than before. "Bullshit. You can't afford a studio apartment, let alone a penthouse. It's a fake. A prop." "Is it?" I turned to the crowd. "Is Mr. Sterling here?" I knew he was. I had seen his name on the guest list at the door. Arthur Sterling, the regional president of the bank that held Richard's defaulted loans. A gray-haired man in a tuxedo stepped forward from the back of the room. He looked confused, squinting at me. Then his eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Myers?" Sterling asked, his voice shaking slightly. "Braden Myers?" "Hello, Arthur." I nodded. "Good to see you." I didn't know you were related to the Thorntons," Sterling stammered. He practically ran over to me, extending his hand. The respect in his body language was unmistakable. It was the kind of respect you give to a man who can fire you with a phone call. "It's an honor, sir. We were just discussing your acquisition of the Liberty Plaza project." Richard looked like he had been slapped with a wet fish. "Sterling? You know him? He's a laborer." "A laborer?" Sterling looked at Richard like he was insane. "Richard, this is Braden Myers. He's the CEO of BM Architecture. He's one of the biggest developers on the East Coast. He was featured on the cover of Forbes last month under the New Kings of New York. Boom. The silence broke. The room erupted. Phones came out. I could see people Googling my name. "It's true," someone shouted from a table nearby. "Here he is. Vanguard Holdings. Net worth? Oh my God." My mother staggered back. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. She looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time in her life, she didn't see her son. She saw $2.5 million slipping through her fingers. "Braden?" she choked out. You're successful?" "I am," I said coldly. "No thanks to you. But why didn't you say anything?" She took a step toward me, her hands reaching out. "Why did you let us think?" "I didn't let you think anything, Mom. You assumed. You assumed I was worthless because I didn't fit your mold." Derek was staring at his fake Ferrari key. Then at me. He looked small. He looked like a child playing dress-up. "Wait," Richard interrupted, his mind racing, trying to salvage the situation. The shark was trying to swim backwards. "Braden, son, this is a misunderstanding. A joke. We were just tough-loving you, toughening you up. And look, it worked." He spread his arms wide, a fake smile plastered on his face. You made it. We're so proud of you. And this gift. Wow. That is incredibly generous. Linda, look at what our boy did for us. Richard reached for the deed in my hand. We accept. Of course we accept. We can put this whole ugly scene behind us. I pulled the deed back. No, I said. What? Richard froze. I said I was going to give it to you, I said calmly. Past tense. That offer expired the moment you called me trash and threw it on the floor. Now, Braden, don't be emotional, Richard said, his voice tightening with panic. We're family. We are not family. I stepped closer to him. I was taller than him now. Stronger. Family doesn't lock you in a basement. Family doesn't steal your college fund. Family doesn't kick you out in the rain. I turned to my mother. You had a choice, Mom. You had a choice 12 years ago when Dad died. You had a choice tonight when I walked in that door. You chose him. You chose the car. You chose the image. I held up the key. So, I'm making a choice now. I looked past my mother, toward the back of the room, where a woman in a simple floral dress was standing near the kitchen door, trying to stay invisible. She had come because I asked her to, but she was too afraid of Linda to step forward. Aunt Patty, I called out. Please come here. The crowd parted. Aunt Patty walked forward, her hands trembling. She looked terrified. Braden, honey, what are you doing? She whispered. Mom, I said to Linda. Do you remember Patty? Dad's sister? The one you banned from the funeral? The one you called trash? Linda didn't answer. She was pale as a sheet. She took me in, I told the room. When these people threw me out with nothing but the clothes on my back, she took me in. She fed me. She gave me a home. And she gave me the one thing Dad left for me, the money he hid from you, Linda. Linda gasped. He hid money? $47,000, I said. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to build a foundation. I took Patty's hand. I placed the heavy brass key and the deed in her palm. Aunt Patty, I said, my voice thick with emotion. This is for you. Patty looked at the key, then at me. Braden, no, I can't. It's too much. It's not enough, I said, kissing her cheek. It's never going to be enough to repay you for saving my life. But it's a start. It's yours. Sell it, live in it, burn it down for insurance money. I don't care. It's yours. You can't do that, Linda screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound. That's my house. He brought it for me. She's nothing. She's a nurse. She's my mother, I said, staring Linda dead in the eye. She earned that title. You resigned. Richard lunged forward. You little bastard. You think you can come here and humiliate us? I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. I have friends in this town. I laughed again. You want to talk about ruin, Richard? I looked at Mr. Sterling. Arthur, I think now is a good time to mention the other business matter. Sterling cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but professional. Yes, Mr. Myers. He turned to Richard. Mr. Thornton, as of this morning, the debt obligations for Thornton Construction, specifically the 3 outstanding loans totaling $5 million, have been sold. Sold? Richard blinked. Sold to who? To Vanguard Holdings, Sterling said, gesturing to me. I smiled. A shark smile. I own your debt, Richard, I said softly. I own your company. I own your warehouse. And unless I'm mistaken about the terms of the lien, I looked at the ceiling of the ballroom. I own this house too. Richard's knees gave out. He literally collapsed into a chair. Derek dropped his fake Ferrari key. It hit the floor with a hollow plastic sound. My mother looked at Richard, slumped and defeated. Then she looked at the deed in Patty's hand. Then she looked at me, the realization of what she had lost. Not just the money, but the son who had become a king, finally hit her. She didn't scream this time. She just covered her face with her hands and slid to the floor, sobbing into her silver dress. I buttoned my jacket. Enjoy the party, I said. I believe the bill is due. The sound of my stepfather hitting the floor wasn't the loud, cinematic thud you might expect. It was a soft, crumbling noise, like a house of cards finally giving up against the wind. Richard sat there on the polished marble, his face an alarming shade of gray, clutching his chest. He wasn't having a heart attack. I knew Richard's medical history from the insurance files I'd acquired. He was having a reality attack. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. 50 of Cedar Grove's elite were watching a dynasty dissolve in real time. But my mother, Linda Thornton, didn't look at her husband. She didn't rush to loosen his tie or call for water. Her eyes were locked on one thing, and one thing only: the brass key in Aunt Patty's trembling hand. That key represented 2,500 square feet of Manhattan real estate. It represented security. It represented the start over she had been chasing her entire life. And she had just watched me hand it to the woman she despised most in the world. "You can't do this," Linda whispered. Her voice was trembling, but not with sadness, with panic. She scrambled up from the floor, smoothing her dress with frantic, jerky movements. She composed her face, forcing that mask of maternal concern back into place. It was terrifying to watch. "Braden," she said, stepping over Richard's legs to get to me. "Braden, baby, listen to me." She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into my suit sleeve. "I know you're angry. I know we've had our difficulties. But you can't be serious about this. About her." She jerked her head toward Patty. "This is a family matter. We need to go somewhere private and talk this through. Just you and me, mother and son." I looked down at her hand on my arm. 10 years ago, I would have killed for this touch. I would have begged for her to look at me with this much intensity. Now it just felt cold. "There's nothing to talk about, Linda," I said, peeling her fingers off my arm one by one. "You made your position clear. I'm a freeloader. Remember." "I didn't mean it," she cried, her voice rising to a pitch that made the guests flinch. I was trying to motivate you. It was tough love, Braden. And look, it worked. You're a CEO. You're rich. I did that. I pushed you to be great." I stepped back, disgusted. "You think you get credit for my success because you abandoned me? I didn't abandon you. I protected you." She looked around the room, desperate for allies. "I sacrificed everything for you kids. Richard and we did the best we could with what we had. What you had," I cut in, my voice sharp as a razor, "was $200,000 of my father's life insurance money, and you spent it on a Porsche and a renovation." "That was necessary," she argued. "We had to maintain appearances for Richard's business. It was an investment, and it would have paid off if the market hadn't turned." "And what about the other money?" I asked. The room went quiet again. Linda froze. "What other money?" I walked back to the table where I had set the velvet box. Underneath the deed, there was one more piece of paper. I hadn't shown this one yet. I had saved it for the end. The final nail. I picked it up. It wasn't a deed. It was a photocopy of a bank withdrawal slip from 12 years ago. "When I was 18, I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on my mother, "I asked you for $8,000 for college. You told me there was no money. You told me to get a scholarship. You told me I had to stand on my own 2 feet. I held up the paper. "This is a withdrawal slip from the custodial account my father set up for my education. It was separate from the main insurance policy. It had $50,000 in it. Dad made you the trustee until I turned 18. I took a step closer to her. "The date on this withdrawal is 3 days after my 18th birthday. The signature at the bottom reads Braden Myers. But I didn't sign this, Mom. I was living in a basement, hiding $3,000 in the ceiling tiles. I didn't even know this account existed until I hired a forensic accountant last month to audit Richard's assets." The color drained from her face so completely she looked like a corpse. "You forged my signature," I said. "You stole my college fund. $50,000. And do you know what you bought with it?" I turned to Derek, who was still standing by the bar, looking like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. You bought a BMW, I said. A graduation gift for Derek. The same BMW he wrapped around a telephone pole 6 months later. A collective gasp went through the room. Eleanor Brooks, the old family friend who had challenged Linda earlier, put her hand over her mouth. Linda, tell me this isn't true. You stole from your own son to buy a car for him. Linda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was trapped. There was no spin for this. There was no tough love defense for forgery and theft. I could send you to jail, I said softly. The statute of limitations on fraud is tricky, but with the amount of lawyers I have on retainer at Vanguard, I could make your life a living hell for the next 5 years. I could have you dragged out of here in handcuffs right now. Linda burst into tears. Real tears this time. Ugly, terrified tears. She dropped to her knees, clutching the hem of my jacket. Please, she sobbed. Braden, please. Don't. We have nothing. Richard is ruined. If you take the company, if you take the house, where will we go? We're old. We can't start over. Start over, I repeated. Like a rough draft? She flinched. She remembered the words. You're right, I said. It is hard to start over with nothing. I know. I did it when I was 18. In the rain. With 2 bags. I looked down at her. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I expected to feel triumph. I expected to feel joy. But I just felt empty. The anger that had fueled me for a decade was evaporating, leaving behind just pity. She wasn't a monster. She was just a weak, greedy woman who bet on the wrong horse. I'm not going to send you to jail, Mom, I said. She looked up, hope sparking in her eyes. You aren't. No, I said. That would be a waste of my time. And honestly, watching you live with the consequences of your choices is a far worse punishment. I looked at Richard, who was struggling to sit up in his chair, wiping sweat from his forehead. I'm going to liquidate Thornton Construction, I told him. My team will strip it for assets. The equipment, the warehouse, the contracts, it's all going to be sold to pay off your creditors, including me. And the house, Richard croaked. Our home. The house is collateral, I said. It goes on the market next week. But we have 30 days, Richard sputtered. By law, you have 30 days, I agreed. Start packing. I turned back to Derek. He was trying to slink away toward the exit. Derek, I called out. He froze. The Ferrari, I said. Is it a rental or a lease? Derek swallowed hard. It's a lease. In the company name? I guessed. He nodded. Then it's mine, I said. Leave the keys on the table. You can take an Uber home. Derek looked at the shiny red key on the table, the symbol of everything he pretended to be. He looked at me, then at the guests watching him with pitiless eyes. He dropped his head, left the key, and walked out the door without a word. I turned to Aunt Patty. She was crying silently, holding the deed to her chest like a shield. Come on, Aunt Patty, I said, offering her my arm. Let's get you out of here. I think you have a new view to check out. Braden, Linda whispered from the floor. Son, please. I'm your mother. I stopped. I looked at her one last time. I etched this image into my brain. The woman who had traded me for a Porsche, now kneeling on a cold floor in a room full of people who no longer respected her. I know, I said, and that is the only reason I'm leaving you with your freedom instead of a prison sentence. Goodbye, Linda. I turned my back on her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back to see if she was watching. I didn't care. Walking out of the Cedar Grove Country Club felt like walking out of a tomb. The air outside was crisp and cool, smelling of fallen leaves and impending winter. But to me, it smelled like oxygen. Pure, clean oxygen. Sarah was waiting by the door. She slipped her hand into mine. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She squeezed my fingers, a silent confirmation. You did it. It's over. Mr. Sterling, the banker, followed us out. Mr. Myers, he said, breathless. I just want to say, I had no idea about the personal nature of this acquisition. If there is anything Vanguard needs to expedite the liquidation process, you have my personal cell number. Thank you, Arthur, I said. Just make sure everything is by the book. I don't want them to have a single legal loophole to crawl through. Understood completely. And, well done, sir. He nodded at Aunt Patty and retreated inside. We walked to the back of the lot where the Rolls-Royce was parked. Under the dim streetlights, the car looked like a beast sleeping in the shadows. Is this yours? Patty asked, her eyes widening. She reached out to touch the spirit of ecstasy, hood ornament, but pulled her hand back, afraid to dirty it. It's just a car, Aunt Patty. I smiled. I opened the rear door for her. The heated seats will feel good on your back. As we drove away, leaving the lights of the country club fading in the rearview mirror, I felt a physical weight lift off my shoulders. It was a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. The weight of needing to prove them wrong. I had done it. I had proven it. And now I could just be. The fallout happened fast. Faster than I expected. My legal team at Vanguard moved with the precision of a surgical strike. Within 48 hours, forensic accountants were swarming Richard's office. They found everything: the embezzlement, the tax evasion, the desperate loans from loan sharks. Richard filed for bankruptcy 3 weeks later. It didn't save the house. The bank foreclosed, and because I held the senior debt, I had the final say. I sold the house to a young family, a nice couple with a baby on the way. I sold it for under market value just to move it fast. I wanted Richard's ghost out of those hallways. Richard and Linda moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighboring town. It wasn't a slum, but for Linda it might as well have been. She lost her country club membership. Her friends stopped calling the moment the bankruptcy hit the papers. The humiliation was total. I heard through the grapevine that Linda tried to get a job at a boutique, but no one would hire her. Her reputation in Cedar Grove was radioactive. She spends her days now posting vague, sad quotes on Facebook about betrayal and ungrateful children. I blocked her account the day after the party. Derek didn't fare much better. Without Richard's company to give him a fake job, and without a car to project a fake image, he crashed hard. His credit cards were canceled. He tried to reach out to me once, via LinkedIn of all places, asking for a recommendation. I didn't reply. Last I heard, he was working sales at a used car lot in Jersey City. The irony was not lost on me. But the real ending, the ending that matters, happened in Manhattan. A week after the party, I took Aunt Patty to the Millennium Tower. We took the private elevator up to the 60th floor. When the doors opened, the apartment was flooded with afternoon light. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed Central Park like a living painting. Patty stood in the middle of the living room, clutching her purse. She was afraid to walk on the white marble. "Braden," she whispered, "I can't live here. Look at this place. I'm just Patty." "You're the woman who saved my life," I said. "You're the woman who worked double shifts at the hospital to buy me books for college because the $47,000 wasn't quite enough and you didn't want me to know. I saw the records, Patty. I know you put your own money in too." She started to cry. "I wanted you to have a chance. You gave me more than a chance," I said. "You gave me a future." I walked her to the terrace. The wind was whipping around us, carrying the sounds of the city below. "This is your home now," I told her. "Everything is paid for. The utilities, the taxes, the doorman, it's all taken care of by the trust. You don't have to work another shift in your life. You can just read your books, drink your tea, and watch the sunset." She hugged me then, a bone-crushing hug that smelled of peppermint and safety. "Your father would be so proud of you, Braden. Not because of the money, but because you turned into a good man despite everything. That was the only approval I needed." 6 months later, Sarah and I got married. We didn't have a big wedding. We didn't want a spectacle like Linda's anniversary party. We got married in a small vineyard in Italy. Just 30 people. Aunt Patty sat in the front row wearing a dress I bought her, looking like royalty. My team from Vanguard was there. Sarah's family was there. There was no empty seat for my mother. I didn't save space for ghosts. I stood at the altar, watching Sarah walk toward me, and I realized something. For years, I thought my family was the people I shared DNA with. I thought I was broken because they didn't want me. But standing there, surrounded by friends who would take a bullet for me, and a woman who loved me when I was dusting drywall off my boots, I knew the truth. Family isn't blood. Blood is just biology. Family is loyalty. Family is who shows up when it's raining and you have nowhere to go. Family is the people who help you build the foundation when the rest of the world is trying to tear it down. I looked at my hands. The same hands that used to bag groceries. The same hands that mixed cement. The same hands that built a skyscraper. I closed my fist. I was strong. I was whole. And I was finally truly free. So that's my story. It's not a fairy tale, and I know it's a bit heavy. But I wanted to share it because I know there are people out there right now, maybe you, who are feeling exactly how I felt in that basement. Now, I have a request for you. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to cut off a toxic relationship to save yourself, or if you just believe that justice was served today, do me a favor. Type the word "good" in the comments below. Just that one word. It tells me that you understand. It tells me that you believe in building your own worth. And honestly, it feels good to know I have a real family out here with you guys. Thanks for listening. Keep building.